Okay, so let's begin for today. Welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you here for our 9th Mindful Engagement session of 2020. My name is Colleen, and Natalie and I will be coordinating today's session. Our teachers, Kyra Jewel Lingo, Hugh Byrne, and George Kinder designed this series to offer support to everyone who is concerned with the state of our world and seeks to engage in it mindfully. Kyra Jewel will lead this month's session with teachers Hugh and George. Kyra Jewel is a Dharma teacher and ordained nun of 15 years in the Thich Nhat Hanh's Order of Interbeing. Kyra Jewel now leads retreats internationally, offering mindfulness programs for educators, parents, and youth in schools, activists, people of color, artists, and families, in addition to individual spiritual mentoring. The title of today's session is Interbeing and Compassion, Open-Hearted Election Practice. This session will begin with a brief welcome and an introduction to Kyra Jewel's talk on interbeing and compassion, followed by a guided meditation. We'll then settle in and listen to Kyra Jewel's talk with a brief co-teacher discussion afterwards. We'll also put folks into breakout rooms for sharing. If you prefer not to participate, that is fine, and you can wait in the main session room with me until folks return. And then after the breakout session, we will return to the main room with Kyra Jewel, who will facilitate a group discussion among all of us. And then we'll finish with some closing remarks and a preview of our upcoming November session with George. So these sessions are offered in the spirit of generosity, and everyone is welcome to participate. For those who can, we invite you to offer a donation to support the teachers and the ongoing programs. Links to give via Venmo and PayPal will be shared in the chat by Natalie, if Natalie you could do that. And donations are equally shared among the teachers. To help us build community, we encourage the use of video throughout the session, and please feel free to rename yourself with your full name or your first name and preferred pronouns, and where you are joining us from. It's always nice to see where everyone's connecting. These sessions are being recorded and also are being shared on Facebook Live. We will be sharing the recording with all those that registered a few days after this session, along with any resources that we reference. And to keep outside noise to a minimum, we ask you all to please keep your microphone on mute until you're called upon to share. And when you do share, please do so mindfully, practicing respect and empathy. And we also encourage the use of the group chat throughout the discussion periods to share excitement, concern, gratitude, inspiration, and to ask any questions that you have. Natalie and I will also be posting links if there's teachers that reference any resources. We've had folks register from a handful of countries today, so we're so excited to welcome each of you here. And with that, I turn it over to Kyra Jewel to start today's session.
So welcome everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, really glad that we're together today to be looking at compassion and interbeing and how we can approach this election with an open heart. I want to begin by offering us a meditation, and this meditation is on compassion, because when we can keep our hearts open, we have access to an energy that is extremely powerful and can protect us and can motivate us to protect others, and to engage in the world in a way that is really useful and healing, even in times of great difficulty and challenge and uncertainty. So I'd like to begin by sharing an image of the Bodhisattva of compassion. In the Buddhist tradition, this is a being who embodies compassion. And the idea of this being is not as someone outside of us, but that we all have the capacity, the great infinite energy of compassion inside of us. But it's helpful to have images sometimes so that that energy can become more concrete for us, and so that it can take more root inside of our hearts and minds. So this is an image that inspires me, and I'll share it with you. Are you able to see this image of a wooden statue? There's so many different kinds of images of compassion of this bodhisattva. Some are male, some are female, some are kind of transgender. It's hard to tell what gender they are. I'll stop sharing now. Some are images with thousands of arms, even 10, 20 faces. This idea of this bodhisattva being able to be available wherever there is a need. And the name of this bodhisattva in Sanskrit is Avalokiteshvara. It means the one who hears the cries of the world. And so he needs all of these arms to respond to all the different needs. She has all these faces so she can see and hear wherever there is a need. And so the music that was just playing as we joined was a chant invoking the name of Avalokiteshvara, Namo Avalokiteshvaraya, from the Plum village monks and nuns of the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh. Every retreat we begin taught in that tradition, we chant this chant invoking the energy of compassion to be there with all of us, and we bring compassion to our own selves, our own suffering around this time of uncertainty, this time of stress and fear, and we bring compassion to those we love that are also struggling. And then we bring compassion, we include all beings, all those who are in some way suffering, we include them in our compassion. And when we invoke this bodhisattva of compassion, we don't feel alone with what we're facing right now. And I want to offer a Christian example of Kuan Yin before I bring us into this meditation. So August 9th is the commemoration of Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, who was formerly known as Edith Stein. She was a well-known Jewish German philosopher who became a Carmelite nun after reading an autobiography of Saint Teresa of Avila. She was later killed in Auschwitz. And there are stories of her on a train to the concentration camp, radiating peace and calm. And when parents were too depressed to feed their children, knowing that they were going to the gas chambers, she joyfully fed them and washed them and served all the children, making sure that they knew they were loved during the last few days and hours of their lives. So this is the meaning of compassion. No matter where we are, what's happening, how dark and horrific the circumstances may be, there is always the opportunity to practice compassion, whether it's toward ourselves, whether it's toward others. And all traditions have this as a central focus of a quality to be developed. So let's practice this now. So I invite us to come into whatever position supports us to be at ease. And to be alert and present. And we're focusing in this session together on our hearts. So let your attention come down to your heart. It's not necessarily the physical heart, but this place at the center of your chest. You could feel it rising as you breathe in and falling as you breathe out. And allowing yourself to receive compassion, to receive care and kindness for whatever anxiety, worry, or fear you're feeling right in this moment. And just less than a week away from the election in the United States. But wherever you find yourself in the world, with whatever is happening in your country, bringing compassion to whatever frustration, anger, loneliness, isolation that you might be experiencing. Whatever sense of being overburdened or burned out on news, overconsumption of news, whatever stress or tension, just allowing yourself to touch into your own suffering and to offer kindness, to feel that you're not alone with this experience. Maybe it's showing up as numbness. Maybe it's showing up as feeling that we're not doing enough, that we're not as involved as we'd like to be. Maybe our suffering is judging ourselves, disappointed in ourselves or our community or our country. Maybe it's fatigue with all that's going on, the normal stress and challenges of our life, compounded with all the uncertainties and anxieties of the pandemic, and now another set of worries and uncertainties of the election. To whatever degree you can, allow this stress, this sorrow, this tiredness to flow down through your body and into the earth. You could see it just like something physically just flowing down your body and out of your feet and into the earth. You don't have to hold this by yourself. This pain, this being ill at ease. And feel the presence of the Bodhisattva of great compassion. The image we saw of this loving presence holding a child. Feel her coming closer, closer and closer until she's embracing us. She's holding us just like she was holding that child. Just feel the energy of compassion penetrating you. Wanting to relieve you of your pain. In many images of this Bodhisattva, she holds a willow branch dipped in the water of compassion, called the nectar of compassion. We can let ourselves be nourished by this nectar of compassion from Avalokiteshvara. Let it come into your heart, softening, opening your heart. This sweet, soothing nectar, this balm. It is said that a single drop of this compassionate nectar is enough to bring back the refreshing spring to our mountains and rivers. Allow compassion from this inexhaustible source of limitless compassion pervade you. Let it penetrate every chamber of your heart. It knows how to hold our suffering, hold our pain with great tenderness, helping us release it and breathe more easily. So we feel lighter, we feel soothed, we feel eased. We can keep releasing whatever is burdening us down into the earth as this nectar of compassion fills our heart. Breathing in the nectar into your heart, breathing out the difficulty, the worry, the fear down into the earth. Allow the Bodhisattva to put their loving hand on your brow to remove the fever of doubt and worry. Really let in that care and kindness. This hand that communicates acceptance, kindness, care, giving you space to be just as you are in this moment. Releasing the stress and strain with each exhale. The earth will transform it for you and hold it, and you can let it go. For right now, let yourself experience freedom from worry and anxiety. Later, you can always put this heavy backpack back on, but for now, see if you can put it down, even just a little bit. Feel the freedom of non-worry, the joy of non-fear. It doesn't mean that you don't care, that what's coming isn't very important. But a heart that's burdened by fear and worry cannot meet the needs of this moment. So let yourself experience open-heartedness, not imprisoned by the pain. The pain can be there, but with compassion, embracing it, all around it, there can also be balance, ease, seeing things clearly, seeing with equanimity. Feel your heart being able to stay open in the midst of this pain, this uncertainty, this huge unknown. Because compassion is what keeps our heart open. It's what allows love and care to flow in and love and care to flow out. You're welcome to stay with offering yourself compassion, but if you feel open, then join me now in bringing to mind someone else who you know is suffering right now. Someone in your close circles may be suffering from the strain of the election, or isolation, or illness, or loss of a loved one, a divorce. Invite them also to be embraced by this goddess of compassion. Picture them in your mind's eye, letting them be embraced in her tender, loving arms. See the energy of support filling their hearts, easing their election stress or any other kind of pain or sorrow. Let the compassion that is keeping your heart open also flow from your heart to theirs. Feel it penetrating them and uplifting them, supporting them to keep going, and also to keep their heart open in this difficult, challenging time. Wishing, may you have all the support you need when you need it. May you hold yourself with compassion and care. May you learn to keep your heart open for compassion to flow in and for compassion to flow out. Now feel free to again stay with yourself or with a loved one, or you may bring to mind those in the world outside of your close circles, in your community, around your country who are struggling right now. People all over the country and around the world who may be fearful, worried, uncertain. Those who are struggling to have their basic needs met, who are not safe in their own homes or neighborhoods, those who don't have job security, unhoused, those whose votes are not being counted, or who are forced to stand in long lines to cast their votes. Also including those who are motivated by hatred and discrimination, and so are working to intimidate others and deprive them of their right to vote. Those who are in detention centers and prisons, not able to protect themselves from the virus. Frontline workers, the working poor, and people of color who are most at risk for contracting the virus. Those of immigrant status being persecuted by immigration customs enforcement, being sent back to countries that are unsafe and separated from their families and children in the US. Keep your heart open, compassion flowing through you as you bring them to mind. Whoever it may be that you know is suffering from the strain of the election, or of isolation, or illness, or loss, invite them all to be embraced by the great being of compassion, seeing the energy of care surrounding them, the nectar of compassion landing on their hearts, softening their hearts, easing their fear, removing their isolation, soothing any other kind of pain or sorrow. Letting the compassion that is keeping your heart open also flow from your heart to theirs. Feel it penetrating them and uplifting them, supporting them to keep going, to keep their hearts open in this challenging time. Wishing them directly. May you have all the support you need when you need it. May you hold yourself with compassion and care. May your suffering be completely removed. May I know I am always intimately connected to you. I care about your suffering. And listen to the bell to close our practice, letting the sound carry our heartfelt care and compassion that we are receiving and that we are offering to all those in need. There's a beautiful line from a poet, a Japanese priest. I can't remember it exactly, but it says something like, "May I embrace all beings in my robe, all suffering beings, may I hold them and bring them into this warmth and safety in my robe." So I'd like to offer some reflections. So when we see that we are intimately connected with everyone, every other being, the only response is compassion. We are others and they are us. Even those that are causing harm, even those that are sowing disunity and discord. So Thich Nhat Hanh would often say that compassion is the best protection. Whenever we have anything that's a threat, whether it's a physical threat or just, anything that's uncertain is perceived as a threat to the human nervous system. So the uncertainty of the coming election, the uncertainty of the pandemic, all these are experienced at a biological, neurological level as a threat. So compassion is the best way to protect ourselves when we feel threatened. It's the way to disarm our own hearts, and it's very disarming to others. So an open heart is what we need in this time. An open heart is responsive, it's resilient. When we close our heart down because of fear, worry, anger, we're not able to respond and be available. We can't even perceive clearly what's happening because our anger, our fear, our worry distorts the reality. So it's like our minds are a lake, a pool of water. And if we have compassion, the waters of those lake, that pond is still and clear. And it reflects very clearly the clouds in the sky, the trees on the banks. But if we're caught in our worry, in our anxiety, in our fear, in our judgment, it's like a wind has stirred up the water and we don't see things clearly, and the clouds aren't reflected accurately in the water, they're distorted. The trees aren't reflected accurately. So our mind and our heart, when we're in the presence of compassion, we actually see the situation clearly. When we don't have compassion, we don't see it clearly. Thich Nhat Hanh also says, with compassion in our hearts, we do not suffer. It's interesting because the Latin root of the word compassion, with suffering, is to suffer with, but that's actually not what real, true compassion brings us to. It doesn't bring us to suffering. With compassion in our hearts, we do not suffer. We face what's in front of us with an open heart, with clear seeing eyes. We're not avoiding the reality, but we know what to do. We know what right action to take. Like Saint Teresa Benedicta, she was responsive to the children on the train to Auschwitz because her heart stayed open and calm. Viktor Frankl, another hero, saint of our time, he could support other people in the concentration camp for many years because he kept his heart open and free of hatred. The Tibetan nuns and monks in the Chinese gulags after Tibet was occupied kept their hearts open. Their biggest fear was to lose their compassion for the Chinese. That's when they knew they would be in danger, if they lost their compassion for their torturers, for their jailers. So this open heart is what allows us to do what we need to do, regardless of what comes, right? Thich Nhat Hanh also says, compassion is a verb. Compassion means you do something. You don't just feel, but you act. We're required to act on behalf of the suffering we see around us. When our mind and hearts are open, we see really with clear eyes the suffering of our neighbor, the suffering of our work colleagues, our own suffering, and we want to respond. So there are groups and people encouraging us to get together with other people. We need to be with other people in this time to have support to take action in ways that are meaningful. Hugh spoke about this last month with the invitation to get involved, to get out the vote. There's many different ways this can look. Some people are saying, get a group of 5 people, 5 people, so that you have a group of people to act with before the election, after the election. Things don't end with the election, even if it turns out the way we want it to turn out. There's still a need to be responsive. So Kriti Kanko, an Indian climate scientist and Japanese teacher, talks about islands of sanity, being with other people who we can do this work with, pods, groups that can support us. We'll send out some links to different resources that can support us in connecting with others to take compassionate action. And so one other piece about this radical action that comes from an open heart of compassion is that we have to let go in the face of uncertainty rather than trying to control or worry our way to a solution. This isn't something we can determine. Just like most things in life, we can't even determine, what happens to our body. It ages, it gets sick. We don't want that to happen. So we don't get to control or say what's going to happen. There's so many factors at play. So how do we offer what we have to offer and then let go? Because if we offer what we have to offer and then it doesn't go our way and then we're crushed, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be sorrowful. We want to keep giving ourselves compassion. But the letting go of the outcome is what allows us to be free, regardless of what happens, and to keep going, because we're going to need to keep going regardless of the outcome on November 4th. So I read this today from Bernie Glassman's book, Bearing Witness. It's in it's called The Zen Master's Lessons in Making Peace, Bernie Glassman. It's in the appendix. It's from the Peacemaker Vows for the Day of Reflection. They have a day every month, 4th Saturday of the month, where they spend in reflection. And this says, I, and then you put your name, for the coming day, commit myself to not knowing, the source of all manifestations, and seeing all manifestations as the teachings of not knowing. I further commit myself to bearing witness by allowing myself to be touched by the joy and pain of the universe. I invite all the hungry spirits into the mandala of my being and commit my energy and my love to the healing of myself, the earth, humanity, and all creations. I love that. I commit myself to not knowing the source of all manifestations and seeing all manifestations as the teachings of not knowing. So what would it mean to do that from now until the election, to commit ourselves to not knowing as the heart of our spiritual practice? Not trying to figure it out, to guess. We don't have to know the outcome to take powerful action, to live our lives deeply in every moment. These days leading up to the election are as important as any other days. The days after the election will still be the most important days of our lives. How do we infuse them with consciousness, with presence, with joy, with the wisdom of uncertainty? Another book from, the author's name is lost to me now. There's great possibility in uncertainty. Alan Watts, The Wisdom of Uncertainty. We can do what needs to be done regardless of what comes. So all we can do is what we can do in our little part of the world, and that is enough. But we do need to do it. But we do what we can, and then we let go. Let's listen to a sound of the bell and just rest back in the peace of not knowing, the possibility of not knowing. So I propose we have 5 minutes for George and Hugh to offer a brief reflection each, and then we'll go into groups, and I'll offer a prompt before we go into groups.
Hugh, would you like to go first?
I'm easy, George. If you feel energy, go ahead.
I'd love to hear from you, if I may request it.
Thank you, and thank you, Kyra Jewel. I'm gonna put my timer on. Thank you, Kyra Jewel, for bringing us back to what really matters and bringing us back to our hearts, and bringing us back to our practice, because it's our practice that can really ground us and support us in these days that we're going through. I don't need to say that these are extremely difficult days. You know, we named in other sessions, you know, and Kyra Jewel has spoken to, you know, the pandemic, the uprising for racial justice, and now the elections, along with everything that's going on in our own lives. We're you know, it's like, how do we hold all of that? How do we hold all of the emotions? How do we hold the hopes and the fears and the worries and the pains? Just a couple of things I want to touch on and kind of on a kind of fairly a kind of big picture level still, is just a recognition that probably many of us, most of us, perhaps even all of us, are kind of feel in the same energy stream around, what's happening and what we hope to happen over the next few weeks. I'd be surprised if there were huge differences. Obviously we all have our views and hopes, etc. But we're, probably there's a lot that we share, and grounding ourselves in the Dharma practice, that's something we all share. So I think, among many, and certainly I feel a sense of hope that we may be moving into a time of new possibilities, but recognizing, as Kyra Jewell, spoke so beautifully about, that we stay grounded in our hearts, that not take us into, into the future, into worry, into over exuberance even. And I want to, I feel kind of myself a lot holding a sense of hope and possibility, that there's a huge possibilities coming out of the uprising for racial justice, coming out of the kind of reaction against what feels so harmful and so divisive and so dishonest about what's been going on and what we've been facing. And I feel with that hope and that sense of possibility, also a recognition of a lot of grief, a lot of grief of what we've been living through and living with particularly in these last few years, but it goes back before the current administration. I feel there's a lot of psychic and spiritual pain about the divisions, first of all, that we're so separate from each other, the society being kind of torn apart in many ways, and how, and I don't say this from a place of blame, but from a place of compassion, how much dishonesty has been in the public realm, in the political realm, that we have to take in every day in our hearts, and how painful that is. And just kind of recognizing for myself, in myself, the importance of staying connected with the grief and allowing myself to feel that, and encouraging that in others as well, not in a being overwhelmed by it, but allowing ourselves to feel it, that there is a lot of pain, and the divisions among us and within families, within people that we're friends with, who may have a very completely diametrically opposed view of how things should unfold and who they support, etc. So holding grief, holding hope, and holding ourselves open to the pain that will be experienced, however things unfold. There'll be 100 million people on one side or close to that who will be, devastated, just as 100 million people. And I don't mean it's exactly the same, because one will be more than the other, but 4 years ago. And so being very conscious about keeping our hearts open to those who will be on, quote, the other side. Ultimately there aren't any sides. We are one, but in this period, this is how things unfold, and through the democratic process, through elections. And how do we reach out, and how do we try to come together in a way that there's a vision, a story, that really holds all of us, a vision of us, and the Dharma helps hugely in doing that. But how is that? How does that manifest on a social and a political level? That sense of us all really being together. You know, if you grew up in World War II, you know, in America, and my parents in the UK, there's a sense of everybody being together, you know, and a sense of unity, and the sense of if somebody, you know, was lying on the ground in you know, on the curb outside, we'd want to help them naturally. You know, we wouldn't ask, oh, who did you vote for? And yet we're really divided in this way. So how do we help to be part of that process of all coming together around a vision? Wouldn't it be wonderful if it were around the vision of climate change, of all working together to you know, to take on this huge existential issue of our time? So I just share those reflections as just some of the things that I'm holding in my heart, and how, you know, how the Dharma is helping me, the teachings, the practice is helping me in these times, and I think can help us all in these times. So I'll pass it over to George, and to share his thoughts.
Wonderful. Thank you, Hugh, and thank you, Kyra Jewel. Hugh, for reminding us of all of the things that are going on right now. And of course, Kyra Jewel did a beautiful layering of that in the meditation, of all of the people calling out for compassion, including those very much on the other side of things, troubled inside themselves and not knowing how to act and not knowing any better. I loved the teaching, Kyra Jewel. Thank you so much. And just as a way of framing this next 10 days, how lovely to just be reminded to hold that spirit of compassion inside of ourselves, and with everybody that we encounter, with each person that we meet, and a reminder of how just the layering that you did in the meditation was so beautiful, starting with just the breath and the chest, and then moving to self-compassion, and then out to the world. And I think that we're all feeling so much of all of that. Very, very helpful. I think what I would like to, I personally am going to do my best to honor that teaching this week. So thank you for the reminder, and honor that teaching, particularly where we're looking at the polarization, and we're on this camp, and these others are in this side, to hold compassion for them. The thing that I would like to call us back to in what Kyra Jewel shared, and just as a reminder for ourselves, if we are greatly engaged, and clearly for most of us, this is the most engaged time we can imagine, where there are times where we just feel so stressed that it's very hard to find our ground. And Kyra Jewel has presented a model of many layers of meditative layers of bringing us back to the ground of the open heart, and of compassion, and of letting go. And I just like to, I'm going to be reminding myself, but to remind everyone else as well, kind of the root of that, the beginnings of that in the meditation, were in a way the beginnings of mindfulness itself, that just by following the breath, we are letting go. Just by following the breath. It's such a beautiful thing. And the other piece of that is that when we follow the breath with ease, when we follow it in terms of its just kind of rising and falling, this nature, the rhythm of the breath, it's something that we can go back to our infancy when we first were aware of the breath and noticed it. But we also feel it in ourselves that when we pay attention just to that rhythm of the breath, there's a sense of comfort in that, as if we're touching into something in the world that is much truer and much larger than all of the things that we're kind of fighting for in this election in this next week. And I think that if we feel so stressed that it's hard for us to find that compassion for others that we'd like to find, wonderful to let go of the judgments that might plague us there and just come back to this simplest of practice of just feeling the rhythm of the breath and the comfort of it. It's something that I do when I just want a minute, when all I've got is a minute to kind of ground myself. I go to the rhythm of the breath. I don't go to a mantra, some kind of instructions of what I'm supposed to do. I just feel the rhythm of that breath. And I recommend it. It can settle you very, very dearly. And it settles you in a wonderful way into the heart and into your connection with all breathing creatures, with the breath of the universe itself. So I just want to share that, and maybe one more tiny aspect of this that also is very valuable. It's so important that we take those minutes for ourselves during this time, if we're going to be able to have compassion and to do the work, the tireless work of bringing this world and this country to peace. But the other thing is just the incredible value of lying down. If you've got the possibility of lying down, rather than go in all the way, if you can take that lying down posture, the lying down Buddha, and go once again to just the rising and falling of the breath, just the rhythm of the breath, and feel yourself held by the mix of the earth itself and this natural breathing. It's a beautiful way of bringing that self-care and that self-compassion so that then we can get up and get back to the work that we're all engaged with. So I think that's all I want to say. Kyra Jewel, again, thank you so much for leading us in this. And back to you, my friend. Yeah.
Thank you so much, both George and Hugh. Those were really beautiful insights about coming back to the basics of our practice and just seeing everyone as part of our family in some way. Such an important reminder. Thank you both so much. So my proposal is to shift our flow a teeny bit and to do like 10 minutes of question and answer discussion. So you could ask questions to all three teachers right now, and then 15 minutes in small groups after that. So if you have a question, you can put it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask a question from your heart. Maybe it's a sharing of what's alive for you as we come together.
I've got a question for you, Kyra Jewel.
Sure.
In terms of your own practice during this week, how will you balance, and maybe you do this, maybe it's just your normal practice, but how are you going to balance the your mindfulness practice with your compassion?
Thank you. Well, I'll just be honest and say that, you know, as we were three teachers, Kathleen, Natalie, we were on the call early planning, and as we started talking about the election, I noticed my anxiety getting bigger and bigger. I was like, whoa! Like, as we were talking about different scenarios, and I was learning different facts and numbers, I was like, oh my God, this is really So it's real. It's something I really have to practice every moment, because any conversation can just be like, ah, you know. So this could, you know, things could. I stand in a particular identity in this country, in this world, and things are not looking good to me. They haven't been looking good, and they could get worse. They could get a lot worse. So this is very distressing. And I have a practice of meditating every morning for half an hour. And, you know, to be honest, I'll sit with a lot of, I mean, just the human mind, and especially now with like, a lot of it's just like, come back to the breath, as you said so beautifully, George, because it can be pretty scary up there in my in my mind. So I just try to keep remembering that I'm sitting right here, and this is all I really need to pay attention to right now. The thoughts that are coming, you know, they aren't where I need to put my attention, at least for this 30 minutes, you know. And then, you know, I feel it's so important to take in things that nourish us and inspire us, especially when we start to feel like we're losing hope or losing inspiration. I watched a beautiful documentary about Dorothy Day and her life in the Catholic worker movement. And she talked about what you were saying, Hugh. She talked about learning to see everyone as the Christ. And that was our personal responsibility, you know, of anyone of faith, is to really see the people in front of us, around us, as our neighbor, and to love them. And I was, you know, reflecting with my partner about this, that you only can do that when you really feel yourself to be loved and in connection. So this thing of compassion, receiving compassion, knowing that you have a place, that you are a manifestation of the one in you. It's not outside of you. That to me, that's a big part of being able to be in the space of compassion, is knowing ourselves to be one of the arms of the Bodhisattva of compassion already. We are that Bodhisattva. We are manifesting that energy in the smallest of ways throughout our day. We can choose to do that. So getting in touch with that, like empowering myself to see myself that way, is what really helps me to not feel afraid when I'm met with suffering in the people around me. Thank you.